Hello everyone and welcome to this video in the NHS Interview Series. If you don't know me, my name is Radhika and I am a clinical fellow in ophthalmology in UK. The focus of this one will be answering questions related to clinical governance, research and teaching from an interview standpoint. While researching for this video, I found sources which have explained these topics using better words and research than I could ever in a video. So rather than repeating the content, I have designed this video to give you an idea about the must-know questions before your interview with resources and links to get you digging deeper into these areas for developing your CV in the long run. The video is divided into 3 segments and you can skip to the section you are interested in. The timestamps are in the description box below. As always, this is based on my understanding and experiences in the NHS and is by no means definitive. With that, let's talk about clinical governance. The 3 things you must know is what is clinical governance, what are the 7 pillars, and how do they apply to your practice. The most commonly quoted definition of clinical governance is from this 1998 paper published in the BMJ, which says that clinical governance is a framework through which NHS organizations are accountable for continually improving the quality of their services and safeguarding high standards of care by creating an environment in which excellence in clinical care can flourish. It is acceptable and even encouraged that you modify this definition to your understanding. The key concepts to mention are quality and accountability. The next step is to understand what are the pillars of clinical governance and how they apply to your practice. I have listed them out here for you and would suggest that you take a look at ISC Medical's website for their section on clinical governance. There is detailed explanation on each of these pillars and how they translate to clinical practice. A clinical audit is an important aspect of practice in the NHS and a frequently discussed topic during interviews. If you have previous audit experience, that's great. If not, I would suggest familiarizing yourself with the concept of a clinical audit, which is essentially a comparison of current practices against standards and using that information to improve services offered. You should also be familiar with the stages of audit, also sometimes called the audit cycle, where you start by first selecting a clinical problem to evaluate, find standards that have been set out, measure current practice in relation to these standards, next do a comparison and plan an intervention and re-audit to see the effects of this change. If you want to read more or plan an audit yourself, I would recommend going through the NICE manual on best practice in clinical audit. It has sections explaining each step of the audit and further resources that I found quite useful. A side note about quality improvement projects, which is a broad term and was quite perplexing for me when I started. This article in BMJ is a good place to begin if you want to figure out what is a QIP and how to do one. The second section of this video is about answering questions on research. It is important to know what is the difference between audit and research. While audit is a clinical practice against set standards, research helps to test the validity of a hypothesis, which can then be used to set these standards. Another popular interview topic is evidence-based medicine. I would suggest brushing up on the definition and familiarizing yourself with the levels of evidence. You could also be asked about your research experience, which you mentioned in your application, or asked to talk about a recent study that you read and how it influenced your practice. Moving to questions on teaching, do include these points when framing your answers about your teaching experience. What types of groups you taught? Was your teaching directed to medical students, junior doctors or nurses? what methods you used, like PowerPoint, clinical demonstration, or a combination, what topics you taught, and how was the audience feedback, and what did you learn from this experience. If you want some pointers on designing teaching sessions and collecting feedback, Mind the Bleep is a blog that has an article dedicated to it with a pro forma for collecting feedback. This is the final video in the NHS Interview Series and has been a fun experience for me. The script was challenging and had to be edited multiple times as I realized the breadth of information out there for this particular video. Hope you find it useful for your interviews, and I will see you guys in the next one.